Hello, my young students, my young learners, my viewers. I hope all of you are doing well and you all are fine and safe at home. I welcome you to this English class, and today we are going to discuss a poem from your class 9 textbook, and the name of the poem is A Legend of the Northland. This poem is from Unit 5 from your textbook Beehive. My dear students, as the title suggests, A Legend of the Northland. The title itself suggests that it is a story, a legend of the Northland. Which part of the country, which part of the world? It is the Northland. Now, before we go to analyze the poem, let me tell you something about the poet. The name of the poet is Phoebe Cary, and she was born on 4th September 1824 in Mount Healthy, Ohio, United States. She is an American poet, and along with her sister Alice Cary, she co-published poems in 1849. Later on, they got their volumes published of their own. After their death in 1871, joint anthologies of the sisters' unpublished poems were also compiled. After their death in 1871, joint anthologies of the sisters' unpublished poems were also compiled. Now let us go on to the poem. This poem is actually a ballad. And what is a ballad? A poem narrating a story in short stanzas. This poem is written in 16 stanzas with 4 lines in each stanza. It is a part of a folk culture, that is, a traditional stories, which are passed on from one generation to another generation. In our Indian context also, we have seen there are several folklores, several folk tales, which are narrated from one generation to another generation. One generation transfers it to the other generation in terms of giving certain stories, talking about the values, talking about the heritage, culture and everything. Now, folk means regional people, right? And lore means story. So, from here, we get to know that it is a part of a folk culture of Northland. And you see the title. Title is A Legend. Legend means story, which is historical and is passed on from one generation to another generation. Now, Northland. Title also has the mention of the name Northland. Northland area which is near North Pole, where daytime is very less and during winters, right? And it is found that it is quite cold during the winters. Now we have to see the setting. It is in Northland, which is cold polar region, including Greenland, Northern Europe and Siberia. The days are very short, nights are long, snow-covered, use of reindeer to tie to the sledges for the use of the people. Means that here you will find a typical setting in the entire poem. As I said, it is a story, so you'll find there is a particular setting in this poem. And what is it? That you'll find certain typical animal, right? What is that? It's reindeer. Mention of reindeer is there. And the place is very cold, it is snow covered, and you will even find the mention of children who are wearing very heavy woolen clothes. Just they look like the bear cubs. Now, as I said, this is a story, so we also have to know what are the characters in this. We have to read about the character Saint Peter. Who is Saint Peter in this poem? He is an apostle, a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ. And you'll find another character, that is old woman here. And there is another character, that is woodpecker. And it's quite interesting to read this poem because you also get some very important message through this poem. We'll also be discussing about the poetic devices, the rhyming scheme, the rhyming pair, and all the other devices. Now let us read the poem, A Legend of the Northland. As I mentioned, this is a story and the setting is in the Northland, that is in the northern pole of our earth, right? It is the place surrounding northern pole. The poem goes this way. Away, away in the Northland, where the hours of the day are few, and the nights are so long in winter that they cannot sleep them through. From the lines of the poem, you can find out, you can guess, or you can make out that the place is described here. And how the place is described, it is far, far away from the Northland, and the place has certain typical characteristic. And what is that? The hours of the day are few and the nights are long in winter. And they cannot sleep them through. That means the nights are so long that they get tired of sleeping. The hours are so long. Where they harness the swift reindeer. As I mentioned in the introductory part also, that we find very typical kind of animal in these regions, and that is reindeer. And what do? They are tied to the sledges, and these sledges are used for carrying the people from one place to another, especially the children, the elderly people who cannot walk, who cannot really manage on these snow covered areas. They use sledges. So they are tied to the sledges, and when it snows, you can see the picture also that there is the place is covered with snow, and the children look like bears' cubs in their funny furry clothes. So how are the children described here? They are looking so funny in their furry clothes. Furry clothes means the clothes which are completely they are covered with fur. Right? So they are furry in nature. The word has come from fur. So they are completely covered. The clothes are completely covered with fur, and they appear to be just like bears' cubs. They tell them a curious story. Now, who are they here? The people, the elderly people. As I said, this is the stories are narrated from one generation to another generation. So here we get to know that the people, the elderly people, they are narrating to the children, right? And what do they tell? They tell them a curious story. What is this curious story? I don't believe it's true. Who is I here? The poet. The poet says that I don't believe it's true. It's an old English. So I don't believe it's true. And yet you may learn a lesson if I tell the tale to you. That means the poet wants us, that the readers, to accept that, yes, the poet is also not very sure about the authenticity of the tale, but wants us to learn a lesson from this poem, from this story, when the poet is ready to tell us this story. Now, how do we really start a story? You must have read several folk tales. And the very common way of starting any folk tale is once upon a time. So here also the poet starts like a story. And how it's begun? You see, once when the good Saint Peter, as I said, there is an important character here, Saint Peter, who is a disciple of Jesus Christ. And when the good Saint Peter lived in the world below, what does it mean? Lived in the world below means he had been sent by the God to be on earth and spread the message, be a messenger of God and spread good words to the people, good values to the people, and teach them morals, teach them, preach them, right? These saints, they actually come, they take birth to preach, to give good messages to the people so that this earth is having no miseries, no problems, and people remain happy. And walked about in preaching just as he did, And here we find that Saint Peter was the one who used to preach in that place. Once what happened? He came to the door of a cottage in traveling round the earth. As I said, he was sent to the earth by God, and he was just moving around from door to door, and he was traveling round the earth, where a little woman was making cakes and baking them on the hearth. Now, here you see that you'll find that now Saint Peter has reached certain place. And where is it? He has reached to a place where a little woman was baking some cakes in her fireplace. You can see the hearth. And being faint with fasting, he had not taken any food, and it has been so long for him to be without food and keep moving. So he was badly in need of food. And being faint with fasting, for the day was almost done. It was almost, the day was almost over, and it was time. He was feeling so hungry that he immediately wanted something to eat. He asked her. Her here means the woman, the old woman, that little woman. He asked her from her store of cakes to give him a little single one. What did he ask her to give? He asked her to give a small single piece of cake that she had baked. What was the reply of that woman? So she made a very little cake. But as it baking lay, she looked at it and thought it seemed too large to give away. Now you see what was going on in the mind of that woman. Do you think from these lines you can say that she immediately and very eagerly she was offering this cake in a very good mood? She was offering this cake to the saint? No, perhaps no. And the moment she was ready with the cake that was baked by her, she looked at it and she gave a thought. And what was that thought? That this cake perhaps is too big to give away. I shouldn't give this big cake to this saint. Therefore, she needed another. What did she do? Once again, she mixed the flour and whatever mixture she had to prepare, she kneaded everything. And again, everything was ready to be baked. And this time she thought that she would be baking a smaller one. And still a smaller one. But it looked, when she turned it over, as large as the first had done. Now what had happened? Initially, she was ready to serve one, but she found it was too big, so she refused it to herself, that no, I will not give. Then she baked another one, same, she found it to be the same size. Then again, what was there in the mind? Then she took a tiny scrap of dough and rolled it flat and baked it thin as a wafer, but she couldn't part with that. Now, second time also she was not convinced to give that piece of cake also. Then what did she do? She took another one, and she started another dough, and she started rolling it, and she just flattened it, and she made it as flat as a wafer, as thin as a wafer, thinking that it would turn out to be a very small and a very thin piece of cake. For she said, "My cakes that seem too small, when I eat of them myself," she says that when I eat, these cakes appear to be too small, but when I have to give it away, then they appear to be so big, are yet too large to give away. But when I have to give it, they appear to be so big. So she finally decided that no, I will not give. And she kept it on the shelf. She put them all on the shelf. Now what happened? Then good Saint Peter grew angry. As you know, Saint Peter was badly hungry, and he was thinking, he was expecting something, some good piece of cake from this little woman. But to his surprise, she had not come up with any kind of offer. And instead, what did she do? Whatever she had prepared, she placed it back on the shelf. And this made the Peter very angry. And as he was hungry and was almost faint means he was even feeling very weak also. And he just could not accept this kind of attitude from the women. And surely such a woman was enough to provoke a saint. And this kind of treatment given by the woman towards the saint was absolutely unexpected. And this was enough for the saint to get angry. Provoke a saint means to make him angry. And he said in his anger, he was completely in he's furious now. And he said, "You are far too selfish." Now the saint is now very upset, and he just speaks his mind. That he says, "You are far too foolish to dwell in a human form." You see the kind of language he uses here, to dwell in a human form. That means you don't deserve to be a human being. Human beings are supposed to show some mercy, and they are always ready. They should be ready to help anyone who is in need. And you are so selfish. You don't deserve to be a human being. You don't deserve to exist on this earth in the human form. To have both food and shelter and fire to keep you warm. And God has given you everything. You are given food, you are given a shelter, you are even given fire to keep you warm. See, my dear children, here you must be thinking, why fire? Because in those places, because it remains very cold, and each and every house, they have got their fireplace and to keep the entire house warm. And even in our country also, the places where the temperature remains very low during the winter season, people have to use these the fire in a very productive way, right? They take help of fire to warm themselves. And these things we are blessed with by God. We are blessed with food. We are blessed with shelter. We are even provided warm clothes. We are provided fire. And who all has done it? It's because of the blessings of God. And somebody who is a disciple of Jesus Christ, he finds such people existing on this earth. They don't deserve to be human beings. They don't deserve to exist here. And he says that he wants to make her realize that you are given food, you are given shelter, you are given fire, all the facilities, all the comforts. And you don't have even this much faith in God that you will be helping somebody who is in need. Now you shall build as the birds do. Now he is angry, and in his anger, what does he do? He just cursed her. And in what way he cursed? That, okay, from today you will be doing just like the birds do. And what do the birds do? Shall get your scanty food by boring and boring and boring all day in the hard, dry wood. You must have seen a very typical kind of bird named as woodpecker. You can see in the visual also. What does it do? It keeps boring, it keeps tapping on the dry wood to get some food. And the amount of food it gets, it's so less. So the poet here wants to convey to us, to readers, through this through the Saint Peter, that we people, if we don't understand the message of God, then perhaps we should be ready for the punishment. Now here is the punishment for this little woman. And what is the punishment? What is the curse that she has to go through? That you will be just like a bird now, and you will be getting very less food, and for that also you'll be doing something which takes lot of time. You have to keep boring, you have to keep tapping on the dry wood to get some little bit of food. Then up she went through the chimney, never speaking a word. After this, the bird she turned out to be a woodpecker, and she reached top on the chimney, and she did not even speak a word, and out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. And what was the curse that was given? That you will be turned into a bird, and you will keep doing this because you did not give food to somebody who was in need of that, who was badly hungry, and you did not understand the feeling of that person, and perhaps she could not recognize. And had she recognized, so who knows whether she would have given or not, what kind of mentality she has. She was really very miser, and she was not a good human being. She didn't have the good qualities, the good virtues, the good values of a human being, what one should possess. And out of the top flew a woodpecker, for she was changed to a bird. Who is she? The little woman. She had a scarlet cap on her head. The only thing that she had, now what was kind of appearance that she had? She turned out to be a bird, and this bird had a dark red color cap on her head. And she was left the same, but all the rest of her clothes were burnt black as a coal in the flame. You can see when we burn something, it turns out to be just as black as coal. And her color, except the cap, except that bright red color cap, the rest of the body was completely black, right? And every country schoolboy, and after this, what happened is that whosoever, country here means the village, the rural place, right? Rural area. So here, schoolboy, or you can say any school-going child, found this woodpecker doing the same, has seen her in the wood where she lives in the trees till this very day, till now. You'll find this woodpecker doing the same. What was she found doing? She was found doing boring for food. She had refused to give food to somebody, and now you see how she has to repay. She was turned into a woodpecker, and not only that, the food which she had refused, she has to work so hard. She has to work so hard for so long to get that small amount of food for herself. So the story is over. The story is completed, right? But the thing is that it's such a simple story, but the message is so loud and clear. And what is that? That if we refuse to help somebody, then we have to be ready for the curse. We have to be ready for the punishment. So what is the message that we get is, what is the lesson that we get? That if we find anybody in need, we should not hesitate to help that person. Always be ready to help anyone who is in need. Don't think about the outcome. Don't think about the result of it. Don't think about what you will get in return. But you should help everyone who is in need. And if you get a chance, it is always said that you should thank God that if you get a chance to help somebody, you should do it. God has given you a chance, a golden opportunity to help somebody. This little woman got a chance, got an opportunity to help this saint by giving him food. He did not ask for anything else. He just wanted a piece of cake. That she did not understand. And you see what she has to go throughout her life. Now, let us see the other aspects of the poem. The rhyming scheme, if you see the lines of the poem, if you refer to your text, you'll find the rhyming scheme is A, B, C, B. How do we find out? I think by now you all know how we can look into the rhyming scheme. You see the last word of the first line. The last word of the first line is Northland. The last word of the second line is few. The last word of third line is winter. So if you see these three words, they don't rhyme. But if you see the fourth one, it rhymes with the second. So that is the reason we have seen the rhyming scheme to be A, B, C, B. This is how we work out on rhyming scheme. Then we have rhyming pairs also. You have a textual question also where you are supposed to find out the rhyming pairs. I have found 3 for you. Rest you can do it, right? Rhyming pairs, few, through. So last sound, when we say rhyming pair, how do we find out? We see the final sound of the word. So we see few, through. So oo sound is the final sound that is being repeated, or you can say that is rhyming. Snows, clothes. So note the last sound, that is again rhyming. So this is how you will find out various rhyming pairs. This poem is full of rhyming pairs. You can work out on that. And as I have already mentioned about the rhyming scheme, so it will help you to find out the rhyming pairs. Now, the poetic devices. The very first poetic device that you will find is alliteration. Again, this poem has got several examples of alliteration. But what is alliteration? Earlier also we have talked about it. So what is alliteration? Alliteration is repetition of the initial consonant sound in 2 or more close words. Now you can see stanza 1. Refer to stanza 1. You will find that, they, them. Here the sound is repeated. So it is an example of alliteration. Similarly, in stanza 6, you will find faint, fasting. So the sound f is repeated, right? Then in stanza 10, you have seem, small. So initial sound is s and it is again repeated. And in stanza 13, you have build, birds, buy, boring. So all these examples you'll find b sound is repeated. I have just given you some examples. I would like you to work out on this, as it is very simple. You just have to see the initial sound of the words, and then you have to see they should not be at too distant places. They should be close enough, right? So those pairs you have to take out, those words you have to take out to find out for the examples of alliteration. The second poetic device we have is repetition. Now what is repetition? Any word or sentence repeated to lay emphasis on. Now in stanza 1 you will see away, away. That means when it is talking about quite a distance, right? So here we see that anything, this particular poetic device is used to lay emphasis on certain aspect, right? On certain point. Like here we want to show that it is quite a distance, right? Then boring, boring and boring. You have seen that those lines in stanza 13 and stanza 16. Similarly in stanza 9 also you'll find the word rolled. So again it is showing that the intensity of that work. How long she has to do that. Boring and boring and boring. So you have to even read it in that. If I say just boring, 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 you won't get the effect of it. So when you see repetition, even the way you read out, that also gives an impact. That also has an impact, and that also has an importance here. Right? So boring and boring and boring, that means it's showing that she'll keep on doing that work. So tiring work, right? Next is enjambment. This is another type of poetic device. It's quite interesting to note here. I don't know whether you have read it earlier or not, but I would like to explain it to you that in this particular poem, you'll find several such lines where the role of punctuation comes into picture here. We have seen that the lines, some of the lines end with a comma or a semicolon or a full stop, but we'll find some of the lines which end with no punctuation. There is no use of any punctuation. Say one line goes, the second line again, you'll find it ends. That means first line goes and it continues in the second line and ends with a punctuation. That is called as enjambment. And you have several such examples here. I have given some examples here. Stanza 1, you can refer to stanza 1, line 3 and 4. You can see, and the nights are so long in winter, there is no punctuation after winter. So you'll find that such is an example of enjambment. Similarly, in stanza 2, line 1, 2, 3, 4, again you will find that there is no punctuation after line 1. Again you will find no punctuation after line 3. There is punctuation after line 2 and after line 4. So this is an example of enjambment, a kind of poetic device. Now the next poetic device we can see is simile. What is simile? Simile is comparison. Comparison, now even metaphor is also comparison, but simile, when we say, again it is using like and as. That means A and B, if we are comparing two things A and B, then we'll say A is like B or A is as B, right? So here we see that like and as has been used in the poem. Stanza 2, and the children look like bears' cubs. So here the children are not bears' cubs, but they look like. So there is a comparison here. Similarly, in stanza 9, you will find, and baked it thin as a wafer. Wafer, you must have seen wafer. It's so thin, right? So she baked that cake in such a way that it was as thin as a wafer. In stanza 15, again we find that the appearance of the bird, black as a coal in the flame. Except the cap, the rest of the part of the body was compared with the black color of the coal, right? So these are the examples of simile. We also have imagery in this poem. What do you mean by imagery? Anything that is related to sensory images. And it helps the readers to visualize author's writings. Now, in more realistic manner, what does it mean? That sometimes there are certain words which are basically describing some kind of movement, or they are describing some kind of sound. They are describing some kind of particular visual. Here in this poem we have seen that there is a visual imagery. How we can say visual imagery? She's baking cake. So from there itself you get an imagery of something being baked, right? That becomes a visual imagery. Sound imagery also, boring and boring. Boring means actually tapping on a tree. So it produces a sound. It is not silently done, right? It produces a sound. So again, when the readers read it, they find they can immediately form a kind of visual, or you can say that you can see that some kind of sound, immediately some kind of sound is created in reader's mind, and that helps the readers to understand the author's writing, author's way of expressing what the author wants to say. Then we have another one called anaphora. Anaphora, again, I think it is a new concept for you, new poetic device. And what is it? It's a repetition of the word or phrase in the successive lines. Stanza 9, you will find rolled, and rolled, and baked. These are repeated. In stanza 12, again you have to dwell, to have. These are repeated. So in the first one, and is repeated in stanza 9, and in stanza 12 you'll find to is repeated here. So this is an example of anaphora. Now let us quickly discuss. We have already read the poem. Quickly discuss what is the theme. Very clearly mentioned. After reading the story, you must have understood that this theme is that greed and selfishness can anger, annoy even a saint. You should not think that saints, they will never consider these feelings. Yes, they can even annoy the saint. What is the tone? Tone is preachy. Yes, the poet wants here to preach something through the character Saint Peter, right? And it is a very sacred and pious poem because it is giving a very sacred message to the human beings. And what is the message that the poet wants to give? That it's a kind of warning also to the people that those who are selfish might be punished. So with the presence of the supernatural element, we should be always careful that it's a warning to us that we people, if we get a chance to help somebody, we should not, at that time we should not be selfish. We should come out with helping hand. We should be ready to extend all sorts of help to that person, whosoever is in need. Now, let us see some of the questions from your textbook. Which country or countries do you think the Northland refers to? As already mentioned, it refers to the places which is close to North Pole. You will find some European countries, you will find Russia, you will find Siberia and all, right? So, you just work out, sit with your map, you can find out. What did Saint Peter ask the old lady for, and what was lady's reaction? He asked for a piece of cake as he was badly hungry and the day was almost over. So, he was in need of something to eat. And what was lady's reaction? She was not very generous. She did not act generously, and she kind of hesitant to give some kind of help. How did he punish her? You know what happened? How was the woman punished? How did he punish her? He punished her by changing her, by making her turn into a bird, that is also a woodpecker, who would keep boring and boring for very scanty food. How does the woodpecker get her food? By tapping on dry wood to get some food. Do you think that the old lady would have been so ungenerous if she had known who Saint Peter really was? What would she have done then? Do you think she would have shown some kind of generosity? Perhaps no. This is up to you. You may say yes, but what the poem says is that perhaps she would have shown the same kind of attitude or same kind of no generosity. She was not at all generous to extend any kind of help to the saint. Is this a true story? As we have already read that these are not the true stories, and even in the poem also, poet has mentioned that maybe it is not true. I don't think it is true, but if I tell you, then we will definitely get some lesson out of this. So, it is not a true story. You have already read it in line number, in the stanza 3, where you get to know that it is not a true story. What is a legend? You have already noted in the discussion part. And why is this poem called a legend? Because it is again a story, a kind of folk tale, folk lore, which is transferred, or you can say it is passed on from one generation to another generation in verbal form, and with the coming up of the written texts, right? It is good that we are able to even read these scripts. Now the last question to you is that the entire story that you have read, you have to write it in 10 sentences, right? It is not a difficult work. You can easily sit, think, rethink, just recollect whatever discussions we had, and you can write it in the form of a short story just in 10 sentences, right? So, I hope you all enjoyed the poem. With this, our class gets over. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.